In 2012, at the Summer Olympics in London, the star of a young Puerto Rican boxer, Felix Verdejo Sanchez, shone brightly. He was called a diamond, one of the most promising athletes of his country. He was predicted to win titles and gold medals. Then it seemed to everyone that this talented and motivated young man will reach fantastic heights in sports. In 2021, the name of the boxer again traveled all the world's media, but this time fell into the section of criminal chronicles. This story is about a teenage attachment that grew into a kind of addiction and led to a terrible tragedy, and also about how the author of the main knockout of 2014, who was praised and promoted by two-time Olympic champion Vasyl Lomachenko, almost received a death sentence, but eventually went to prison for life. It is noteworthy that despite the presence of irrefutable evidence and confessions of the boxer's accomplice, he himself to this day refuses to plead guilty. The future star of world boxing was born in the Puerto Rican city of San Juan in 1993 on May 19th. He grew up in a rather modest large family and from an early age was fond of port. True, in childhood, he planned to connect his life with baseball, but his further fate was determined by a funny incident. When the boy was 9 years old, a family friend came to visit them with his son of the same age. The boys were playing in the yard, but suddenly quarreled and a fight broke out. Parents separated the children, and the father of the future athlete noted that if he wants to fight with someone in the future, let him wear boxing gloves. After that fight, Felix, at his request, was taken to a local gym, where the boy, as he later admitted himself, from the first training session fell in love with boxing. At the age of 16, he won the Pan American Junior Championships. A year later, he won his country's championship, and a year later, he went to the Olympic Games in London, where he reached the quarterfinals. In the same year began his brilliant career in the professional ring. In total, Verdejo had 29 fights, gaining 27 confident victories, and in 2014, he was recognized as the author of the best knockout in the fight against Sergio Villanueva. A year later, Felix won his first championship belt with the WBO Latino title, which he subsequently defended 6 more times in 2 years. Everyone who saw him in the fight had no doubt. This young man will write his name in the history of world boxing. And now let's get to know Keishla Rodriguez. The girl was born in November 1993 in San Juan. The full name given to her at birth is Keishla Marlene Rodriguez Ortiz. Her parents, Jose and Keishla Rodriguez, had another common daughter, Bereliz Nicole, and also the couple raised Keishla's son, Jonathan, from a previous marriage of a woman. Keishla grew up an open and sociable girl. She did well in school and adored animals, dreaming of becoming a veterinarian in the future. Her best friend was her sister Bereliz, to whom she confided all her secrets and worries. Keishla studied in the same school with Felix Verdejo, who was her age. Young people were acquainted since childhood, and in adolescence between them began a romantic relationship. In 2011, Rodriguez's parents divorced and separated. Keishla moved to relatives in Florida, and her daughters, who were by then already adults, decided to stay in San Juan. Despite the fact that each of the sisters had long since lived their own lives, they continued to stay in close contact and told each other about everything that was happening to them. At the age of 18, a promising boxer, who has already managed to take part in the Olympic Games, had an affair with a young schoolgirl and aspiring model, Eliza Maria Santiago Sierra. At that time, the girl was only 14 years old, and she was still in school, but even then she made big plans for the future with a promising and world-famous athlete. In addition, Eliza's parents were not at all against this relationship. Attractive and talented Felix, who has always had a lot of fans, becoming a boxing star, literally bathed in the rays of fame and was surrounded by female attention. He did not miss the opportunity to spin a novel or a passing affair on the side, and also, despite the serious relationship with Eliza, continued to meet with his school friend Keishla. Keishla's sister, Bereliz, and her mother, Keishla Rodriguez, knew about the affair and did not approve of the relationship. In addition, the situation was very ambiguous. On the one hand, Eliza considered herself the only woman and great love of the athlete, was preparing for the wedding, and made far-reaching plans for their joint future. On the other hand, Keishla knew that the lover has a fiancé, but at the same time, Felix did not let her go. On top of that, he was her first great love, and deep down, the naive girl herself still hoped to be the one. In 2016, the boxer did marry the young Eliza, who at that time was barely 19 years old. Eliza by that time was already quite a famous model, had tens of thousands of followers in social networks, and also opened her own beauty studio for eyelash extensions. In August of the same year, just a few months after the wedding, the athlete got into a serious car accident when he was rushing on his motorcycle. He was taken to the hospital in serious condition with head injuries, bruises, and lacerations. His trainer, Ricky Marquez, seriously feared that his talented charge would go off the rails at the height of his career. But Felix, contrary to the disappointing prognosis, made a rapid recovery and soon returned to the ring. In September 2019, the boxer published in his profile in the social network a picture with Elise, who was in a large term of pregnancy. In the comment to the photo, he wrote, "Soon I will meet my daddy's princess." And a month later, he announced the birth of a daughter, who was given the name Miranda Verdejo Santiago. The young man in public looked like a loving husband, caring father, and an exemplary family man. But secretly from his wife, he continued to meet with Keishla, who could not let go. As Eliza later admitted, she guessed that her husband was cheating on her, but every time he tearfully vowed to leave his mistress. Keishla repeatedly tried to break off this painful relationship, but Felix would not let her go. She had no other men, because the boxer threatened that if he found out about the fact that Keishla had someone, not good for her and her chosen one, Keishla herself, who had fallen in love with Verdejo since high school, continued to love him despite everything. Rodriguez, as planned, connected her life with the care of animals and got a job at the Center of Veterinary Medicine and Aesthetics. Colleagues described her as conscientious, hardworking, and very responsible. She lived with 2 dogs and a cat, which she simply adored. In 2020, Eliza discovered the correspondence of her husband with several mistresses, including Keishla. The wife gave her husband a scandal and threw him out of the house, threatening that she would file for divorce and forbid him to see his daughter. Eliza's threats had an effect. In addition, in the career of the athlete at that time, there was a serious decline and unnecessary problems where he did not need. For a while, he really stopped seeing Rodriguez, but Felix still did not let her go, trying to control almost every step Keishla. After a few months of secret visits resumed, and in April 2021, Keishla discovered that she was pregnant. She bought a rapid test at the drugstore, which only confirmed her fears. She first called her sister, who was aware of her complicated relationship with the athlete, and told her everything. It was out of the question to have an abortion, because Keishla was already 27 years old, and she was ready to have a child, even if she had to raise it on her own. A few days later, Keishla broke the news to the father of her child, hoping in her heart that he would accept it. But Felix was not happy, to put it mildly. He got angry and told his mistress that she should go to the doctor, and if the pregnancy is confirmed, it will be necessary to have an abortion. Naturally, Rodriguez answered him with a firm refusal, but the boxer began to threaten her and insist. Felix said that an illegitimate child will finally destroy his reputation, and this he cannot allow. After Keishla's visit to the hospital, her pregnancy was confirmed, and she now had a certificate to prove it. She called Felix and told him everything, which made him furious. Felix shouted and demanded that Keishla immediately get rid of the child, but she again responded with a categorical refusal. Then the athlete decided to go on the sly, saying that he did not believe her and wanted to personally look at the issued medical certificate. He appointed Keishla a meeting in the evening in a crowded place, which did not surprise her because they always tried not to draw attention to themselves and did not get in front of anyone. A few days before the meeting, the boxer stopped by his old friend Luis Cadiz, who worked in a local machine shop and also had ties with the criminal world, selling illegal drugs. Felix briefly outlined the situation and asked him to help him get rid of his pregnant mistress. Luis had previously been in the field of vision of the police, and the prospect of being in prison scared him. But the athlete was persistent, assured that everything would go smoothly and the police will never come out on them. Besides, Felix promised him an impressive cash reward, and Luis agreed. With the support of an accomplice, Felix called Keishla and told her that he wanted to meet her on the evening of April 29th to confirm her pregnancy and decide what to do next. Immediately after talking to her lover, Keishla called her sister back and told her everything. She still had hope that Felix would accept her child and would not insist on an abortion. But Berylise all this situation is quite alarmed. She knew that the boyfriend had threatened her sister, and she was worried that he wouldn't do anything to her. Berylise called her mother and shared her concerns, but even together they could not dissuade Keishla from that fateful meeting. At the appointed time, Rodriguez, taking a doctor's note, arrived at the meeting in her own Kia Forte automobile. Verdejo drove there in his pickup truck, in the back of which Luis was hiding. Keishla immediately got into the athlete's car and showed him the results of the tests. He once again talked about terminating the pregnancy, but Keishla, crying, again responded with a refusal. Against this background, the couple began to quarrel violently, turning to shouting. Then Felix suddenly hit Keishla in the head with his fist, from which she immediately lost consciousness. Until Keishla regained consciousness, Felix took a syringe with a large dose of illegal substances hidden in the glove compartment of the car, which Luis had obtained at his request, and injected Keishla. Then, together with his accomplice, they carried her to the back of the car, where there were already prepared pieces of wire and a concrete block. The men tied Rodriguez up, attached the load, and then covered her with a tarp so that no one would accidentally see anything. Felix then returned to the pickup truck while his accomplice got behind the wheel of Keishla's vehicle. Together, they drove to the bridge over the San Jose Lagoon. It was virtually deserted at night, and the men, making sure no one could see them, threw Keishla, still alive, into the water. Afterward, however, they decided to fire a few test shots in pursuit, using the firearms they had brought with them so as not to leave the victim any chance. Having finished the massacre, each of the perpetrators went home. Keishla's co-workers were the first to worry when she didn't show up at the Veterinary Medicine and Aesthetics Center the next day. Keishla has always been very responsible and couldn't just not show up for work without notifying anyone. Since she didn't answer the phone, it was decided to contact her sister to find out what happened. After several unsuccessful attempts to contact her sister, she went to her house. No one answered the door, but Berylise had a spare key, so she got in without difficulty. However, she was met only by hungry animals who had not eaten anything for almost 24 hours. Now Berylise was already in a panic because she realized that something terrible or irreparable had happened to Keishla. She immediately called her mother and told her everything, and then reported to the police about her suspicions and threats to her sister. She also called Felix, but he claimed that he had spent the previous evening and night at home with his family and had not gone to any meeting. The missing girl's mother took the first flight from Florida to San Juan. She thought that her lover might have taken her daughter to a private clinic and paid for her to have an abortion without her consent. Kayla didn't even want to think about the fact that Keishla was no longer alive. The first thing to do was to question the missing girl's neighbors and co-workers, but they didn't notice anything suspicious and couldn't provide the investigation with any useful information. In parallel, messages about the disappearance of Rodriguez were posted on popular social networks with requests to respond to those who know anything about her fate or current whereabouts. The case quickly received wide publicity, and when it became known that the missing girl was in a long-term relationship with a famous athlete and was expecting a child from him, reporters literally lined up to interview any of Rodriguez's family members. The relatives did not hold anything back and spoke out about their suspicions, among other things, blaming Felix for the incident. On April 30th, Keishla's car was found abandoned on the east side of the city, with her documents and personal belongings inside. No signs of struggle were found in the interior, giving a faint hope of finding its owner alive. On May 1st, a passerby strolling on the bridge over the lagoon saw a strange shape resembling a human body in the shallow water. He reported his discovery to the police, who soon recovered from the water the body of a young woman, presumably the same one the whole city had been looking for several days. Members of the Rodriguez family, who arrived to identify the body, hoped to the last that it was not Keishla, but their hopes were not realized. The body had been in the water for several days and changed a lot, but the girl was immediately identified by a remarkable tattoo on her arm. When news of the gruesome discovery hit the press, the residents of the city revolted and began to go out to spontaneous rallies, demanding punishment for those responsible. The same day, Verdejo was detained and taken to the police station for questioning, but the athlete categorically denied his involvement and claimed that on the night of Keishla's disappearance, he was at home with his family. As there was nothing to charge him, Felix was released on his own recognizance. One of the key witnesses was the athlete's legal wife, who at the first interrogation admitted that she was aware of his affair with Keishla, but that she had heard about her rival's pregnancy for the first time. On top of that, she did not confirm her husband's alibi, saying that he was not at home on the night of the murder. The first thing investigators did was check traffic surveillance footage on the way to the bridge from which Keishla was thrown. That's how they found Felix's pickup truck and the victim's car traveling behind each other. But the Kia Forte was clearly not driven by its owner. On the same day, the boxer's car was seized for examination, and in its body they found some hair of the deceased. Luis was the first to surrender to the police, promising to tell the whole truth in exchange for a reduced sentence. Felix was also taken into custody, but he refused to cooperate with the investigation, did not answer questions, and continued to deny his guilt, despite the presence of irrefutable evidence. A firearm was seized from Felix, which he used to shoot the victim from the bridge, and for which he had an official permit. Also, a cell phone check confirmed the fact that Felix, Luis, and Keishla were in the same location on that fateful night. Keishla's final farewell was on May 8th, and the funeral ceremony was all over the national news. It was a kind of action calling for the perpetrators of the tragedy to be punished to the full extent of the law, as well as an action to draw public attention to the problem of gender violence. The coffin with Rodriguez's body was brought to the cemetery not in a traditional hearse, but in a white carriage, over which white flower petals were thrown from the air. Many famous Puerto Rican natives, including show business stars, athletes, politicians, and public figures, have spoken out about the high-profile incident. Verdejo was charged with carjacking, kidnapping, premeditated murder, and the murder of an unborn child. All of these crimes together carried the death penalty, but the relatives of the deceased from the very beginning asked the court to elect a sentence of life imprisonment for the killer, so that he would suffer in captivity for the rest of his life. The hearing was repeatedly postponed due to the worldwide coronavirus pandemic, but in the spring of 2021, the trial was held in virtual mode. The court found that the crime was committed by a group of persons by prior conspiracy and with particular cruelty against a pregnant woman. It was possible to reconstruct the chain of events of that night and the details of the crime, mainly thanks to the testimony of Luis, who did not deny his guilt. He admitted that it was he who, at the request of a friend, got the drug for injection and also brought a wire and a concrete block to get rid of the body. But Felix continued to insist on his non-involvement in the case, although his words could not seriously affect the situation. By the way, the wife of the boxer, who acted in court as a witness, almost immediately after the arrest of her husband filed for divorce and tried to abstract from what was happening, focusing on the development of his business and raising a young daughter. According to some reports, not so long ago, Eliza Santiago remarried. Eliza herself admitted in an interview that she repeatedly received anonymous calls and messages with death threats, as well as death wishes to her and even Miranda. Many considered it was the spouse of the athlete as the organizer of the crime, but no evidence was found. In the summer of 2023, it became known that the jury, having familiarized itself with all the evidence and heard the testimony of all the witnesses, was finally ready to announce the final verdict. Felix Verdejo and his accomplice Luis Cadiz were found guilty on each of the charges against them. But despite this, the killers have not yet been sentenced. The next court hearing is scheduled for mid-November 2023. Most likely, both men involved in the deaths of Keishla Rodriguez and her unborn child will likely go to prison for life, with no right to ever leave prison. This case is of India's first famous perfume expert, Monica Good. The reason for Monica's murder and the method used by the killer shook the entire India. The date was actually October 6, 2016. Monica Gurdi resided in the village named Sangolda in the famous state of Goa in India. Goa is known for its famous beaches, culture, climate, and historical places. Besides, here you can also get a chance to witness colorful architecture, greenery, and beautiful sunsets daily. Actually, Monica lived in a 3-bedroom rented apartment in a society named Sapna Raj Valley in Sangolda village. As usual, at around 9 to 10 in the morning, Monica's maid arrives at her house and rings the doorbell of Monica's apartment. However, there is no response from inside. Then the maid rings the bell again, but still no response. Then she tries calling out several times and rings the bell 3 or 4 more times. Additionally, she knocks on the door, but still there is no sound from inside and no one opens the door. This situation feels very strange to the maid because Monica has never done this before. Feeling a little anxious now, she calls Monica's brother, Anand Gurda, who lives in Mumbai, and explains the entire situation to him. After this, Monica's brother Anand calls Monica's phone, but there is no response from the other end. He keeps trying to connect with his sister through calls, but Monica doesn't pick up the phone. After that, Anand calls Monica's neighbor, who lived in the adjacent apartment, and Monica had also left a duplicate key to her. Shortly after Anand's call, the woman arrives outside Monica's house with the duplicate key. She then opens the door with the same duplicate key, and as soon as Monica's neighbor and her maid enter the house, both scream because Monica was lying straight on the bed. Her hands were tied behind the bed, and there was no clothing on the lower part of her body. Additionally, Monica was not moving at all. Seeing all this, Monica's neighbor immediately calls the police. Soon after, the Goa police arrive at Monica's apartment with some lady police officers, an ambulance, and doctors. However, when some doctors cover Monica's body and check her pulse, it is found that Monica has passed away. Afterwards, the dead body is sent for postmortem, and then the room is searched. The police searched the room, but the surprising thing was that there was no evidence of forced entry anywhere in the entire apartment. There were eggshells in the room, suggesting they had been eaten recently. Then Monica's purse was checked, but apart from some debit card bills, the police found no evidence in it. Now, to find evidence, the police consider examining all the CCTV footage in the society. But then they find out that there are no CCTV cameras installed in that society. Besides this, the police also question the people living in Sapna Raj Valley. However, nobody has seen any suspicious person entering or leaving Monica's house in the past day. Nevertheless, the police also investigate from the angle of theft, but nothing was missing from Monica's flat that could indicate that this murder was committed for theft. Looking at all these things, the police believe that whoever murdered Monica had some information about her because no one forcefully entered the flat and nothing was stolen from the house. However, Monica was married, but due to some disputes, she had been living alone for a year. Therefore, the police's suspicion first falls on Monica's husband, Bharath Ramanrutham. After that, the police interrogate him about this murder, but nothing comes to light during the interrogation that would make them suspect him. In fact, Monica was the daughter of a former judge in Mumbai, Ramesh Kuda, and she was initially a photographer, but later she started researching on perfumes. After this, in a short span of time, she became a successful perfume expert. Due to her profession, Monica was quite famous not only in her society, but also throughout the city, often seen hobnobbing with big businessmen. Therefore, as soon as news of Monica's murder surfaced, the entire state of Goa was in shock. At that time, this was the news running on every news channel in the country, and the public wanted to know who the mystery killer was. Meanwhile, Monica's postmortem report also arrives, revealing that Monica died due to suffocation, and it also becomes clear that she was raped. Anyway, the police had investigated the case from every angle so far, but they had neither found any suspects nor any clues. But then, during the investigation that evening, a police officer suddenly remembers that they had found some debit card bills from Monica's purse, but they hadn't found any debit card during the entire search. Afterwards, the Goa police approach the bank regarding the bills of that debit card and request to check the transaction details of that card. It is found out that on the morning of October 6th at 6 o'clock, this card was used at an ATM in Porvorim area. Porvorim is merely 4 to 5 kilometers away from Sapnaraj Valley. Following this, the police instruct the bank to keep an eye on this card and also scrutinize the CCTV footage of the ATM in Porvorim. The face of the boy who withdrew money from that card was captured on the ATM camera. Subsequently, with the CCTV footage in hand, the Goa police reach Sapnaraj Valley. As soon as the locals see this footage, they recognize the boy shown in the footage immediately and identify him as Raj Kumar, who used to be the old security guard here. However, he was fired from his job 2 months ago on charges of theft. For the Goa police, this was a major success because for the first time in this case, the police had a name and a face of suspect. Now, when the police check Rajkumar's background, they find out that Rajkumar, 21, is from Bathinda city in Punjab state, and there have been several theft cases registered against him before. The police had all the information about Rajkumar, but the challenge now was how to catch him. So, to catch Rajkumar, the Goa police started waiting for the next transaction from Monica's debit card. Some time passes, and suddenly the police find out that recently, some money has been withdrawn from an ATM in Bangalore City using this card. Let us tell you that Bangalore City is about 370 miles away from Sangolda village. Upon seeing this, the Goa police immediately spring into action and contact the Bangalore City Police. After that, Bangalore police checked the CCTV footage of that ATM, and Rajkumar's face was clearly visible in the footage of that ATM as well. Following this, Bangalore police took Rajkumar's photo and began questioning all hotels and lodges around that ATM. After a while, a man at the reception of one hotel recognizes Rajkumar's photo and says, "Yes, a man with this face is staying in our hotel, but he has gone out for some work right now." Afterwards, some police officers dressed in civilian clothes stand outside the same hotel, waiting for Rajkumar to arrive. But as soon as Rajkumar returns to the hotel after a while, the police officers recognize him and apprehend him. Now, because the police officers were in civilian clothes, Rajkumar doesn't even recognize them. And just like that, on October 8, 2016, 2 days after Monica's murder, Rajkumar is arrested from a hotel in Bangalore. Then Goa police are contacted. Afterwards, the Goa police arrive in Bangalore and take Rajkumar to Goa with transit remand from the court. Now, the interrogation begins, and due to the firm questioning by the police, Rajkumar admits to killing Monica. When the police ask him why he did it, he narrates his entire story to the police, and the story goes something like this. Actually, in the month of June, 39-year-old Monica decides to shift to Goa for her perfume business, for which Monica starts looking for a rented flat, and on June 7, 2016, she reaches Sapnaraj Valley to see a flat. At the society's gate, Monica meets security guard Rajkumar, and the society's management had already called Rajkumar beforehand, informing him that a woman would come to see a flat, so show her the flat. Afterwards, Rajkumar shows Monica the flat, and after seeing it, Monica leaves from there. But what happens here is that during showing the flat, Rajkumar falls in love with Monica unilaterally. Now, day and night, he kept thinking only about Monica. About 4 to 5 days pass like this, and then one day Rajkumar becomes very happy because that day Monica had come to shift to Sapnaraj Valley with her belongings. After that, Monica tells Rajkumar that the flat he showed her, he has taken that flat. Now, because Rajkumar was very happy, he himself, with the help of 2 people, delivers Monica's belongings to her apartment. Rajkumar does this because he wanted to see Monica repeatedly, but because he was a security guard, he didn't get many chances to see and meet Monica. But then one day an idea comes to his mind, and he goes to his manager and says that he wants to do the cleaning and maintenance work of the society's cars along with his duty, because he is in desperate need of money. After hearing Rajkumar's need, the manager also agrees to his proposal because he thinks that this way Rajkumar will earn some extra money, and the needs of the people living in the society will also be fulfilled. However, Rajkumar had something else in his mind, and after this, he goes straight to Monica's apartment. After that, he tells Monica that now he can also clean her car, but it will cost her some extra money. Monica also agrees to this because she didn't have enough time to do household chores while handling her business. Now, Rajkumar started cleaning Monica's car and would use the pretext of exchanging keys to also visit Monica's apartment, where he would see Monica 3 or 4 times a day. But it was due to the cleaning of this very car that one day Rajkumar loses his job. It so happened that one day, Monica's umbrella went missing from this car. Monica asks Rajkumar about it, but he says he didn't see any umbrella in the car. After this, Monica complains to the society management and says that today, not only my umbrella, but many other persons' things have gone missing just like before. If such incidents continue to happen in the society, it will tarnish its reputation. Now, after hearing Monica's complaint, the society management takes this matter seriously and begins an investigation. It is then found out that only Rajkumar used to open Monica's car for cleaning, besides Monica herself. After that, a search is conducted in the guard room where Rajkumar used to stay, and Monica's umbrella is also recovered from there. Now, since thefts were already a concern in society, after Monica's umbrella is found, suspicion falls entirely on Rajkumar. As a result, on July 22, 2016, Rajkumar is dismissed from his job on theft charges. From here, the story takes a new turn. While Rajkumar had deeply loved Monica before, now he starts to harbor a significant amount of hatred towards her. However, after being dismissed from his job, Rajkumar leaves and starts working as a laborer in the Ponda area of Goa. But even there, he only works for a few days. During this time, he meets Monica twice and asks her to withdraw the theft complaint, but Monica flatly refuses. Now, hearing this, Rajkumar gets even angrier, but he couldn't do anything at that moment. After that, Rajkumar arrives in Chennai in search of a job, then goes to Mumbai from there, and finally spends some time working in Pune city. Everywhere, Rajkumar earns his living by doing odd jobs, but when he doesn't find any decent job anywhere, he returns to Goa on the 2nd of October 2016. But this time, he had something planned in Goa. There was still a lot of hatred against Monica in his mind. The very next day, that is, on the 3rd of October in the afternoon, Rajkumar reaches Sapnaraj Valley again. He enters the society through the main gate, and by chance, no one sees him entering. Then he goes straight to Monica's apartment below, but he notices that Monica's car is not parked there. Seeing this, he understands that Monica is not at home at the moment. However, instead of leaving from there, Rajkumar decides to wait for Monica to arrive in the society. Now, because Rajkumar knows every route in the society, he decides to hide on the terrace of the society because, generally, no one comes to the terrace. Meanwhile, Rajkumar keeps looking down repeatedly and checks Monica's car, but even after the whole October 3rd passes, Monica's car is not seen. Then the next day, October 4th comes, but Monica's car still doesn't show up, and then October 4th also passes. On October 5th, Monica's car was checked several times by Rajkumar since morning, but it wasn't seen. Now, it had been almost 2 days since he stayed on the terrace. There was neither food to eat nor anything to drink on the terrace during this time. Many times, Rajkumar felt like leaving from there, but the fire of revenge didn't let him go, and fueled by this vengeance, Rajkumar spent more than 48 hours hungry and thirsty on the terrace. Around 3 to 3:30 p.m. on October 5th, 2016, Rajkumar came down once again, and this time he saw Monica's car parked. This meant that Monica had returned home. Seeing this, there was a strange smile on Rajkumar's face, but then he went back to the terrace and started waiting for darkness. After that, he comes downstairs around 6:30 in the evening and rings Monica's flat doorbell. When Monica asks who, Rajkumar identifies himself as a security supervisor. Hearing this, Monica opens the door, but as soon as she does, Rajkumar forcefully pushes her and then shuts the door from inside. Before Monica can comprehend anything, Rajkumar takes out a knife from his pocket and warns her, "If you make noise, I'll stab you." Still, Monica screams loudly to protect herself, but Rajkumar covers her mouth with his hand. Then Rajkumar takes Monica to the bathroom, intimidating and controlling her. After that, he forcefully takes Monica to the bedroom at knife point, lays her on the bed, ties both her hands behind the bed first, then ties both her legs as well. Now, Rajkumar demands money from Monica at knife point. Upon seeing herself trapped, Monica also gets very nervous, so she tells the Rajkumar, "Take all the money in the purse." After that, the Rajkumar empties Monica's entire purse. About 4,000 Indian rupees come out of the purse, like $48. But the Rajkumar's desire is not satisfied with that, and he asks Monica for more money. So Monica says, "I only have this much money right now. If you need more money, I have a debit card. Take it and withdraw money from the ATM." The Rajkumar didn't know how to use a debit card. Still, he learns from Monica how to use it. So, systematically, Monica tells him the way to withdraw money, how to insert the card into the ATM machine, then select the language, and then how to enter the secret PIN. And along with that, she also tells him her debit card's PIN number. I think, maybe in that situation, Monica feels that now Rajkumar will leave her and go from here. Then she will complain to the police and Rajkumar will be caught through the location of the debit card. But Rajkumar takes the money and card and puts a cloth in Monica's mouth. After doing all this, he now knew that Monica could not do anything, so he leaves from there with great confidence and then goes to the kitchen. He takes out water from the fridge, boils the eggs, eats them with great ease, and there was no hurry for him. He was eating and drinking with great comfort because he knew that Monica lived alone in that flat. Now, he also takes out ice cream from the fridge and eats it. Besides, he also eats chocolate, meaning that all the hunger and thirst he had been suffering for 2 days on the terrace is satisfied now. It was around 12 o'clock at night by all this. When his stomach is full again, he returns to Monica. He takes her phone, although it was locked, but Rajkumar's unlock it by forcing Monica. Then Rajkumar opens an adult site on her phone and forcibly shows her 3 adult videos. Feeling all this, Monica becomes even more anxious because she realized that Rajkumar was not going to let her go now. Then Rajkumar unties the rope from Monica's legs and removes all the clothes from her waist down. Then he fulfills his desire that had been in his mind since the first day he saw Monica. It was nearly 2 a.m. in the morning by now, and Rajkumar had been in Monica's apartment for almost 8 hours. When Rajkumar's desire was filled, he gets nervous for the first time when the question arises in his mind whether Monica knows him well, and if he leaves Monica alive, she will tell the police about it, and then the Rajkumar will be punished. So the prince lifted a pillow from the same bed and began to suffocate Monica's mouth and kept pressing until she died. Then the Rajkumar got up from there comfortably and went to the bathroom again. After that, Rajkumar shaved his beard, then he bathed, and at 3:30 a.m. on October 6, 2016, in the darkness, he sneaked out of the Sapna Valley stealthily. Then at 6 a.m., after withdrawing money from the ATM, he went to Bangalore, where the police arrested him. After hearing the entire story, all the police officers were quite surprised. After that, the Goa police gathers all the evidence against Rajkumar. Then, on January 6, 2017, a 228-page charge sheet is present in court, charging murder, rape, and robbery. However, the trial of this case is still ongoing. Let's see when the criminal will be punished. If there is any update in this case, we will update you through the channel's community post. So friends, this was the complete story of the Monica Gurd murder case. In Westfield, New Jersey, behind the stately doors of a luxurious mansion, a shocking secret lay dormant. John List, a devout father and husband, led what appeared to be the ideal suburban life with his wife Helen, their 3 children, and his elderly mother. Yet, beneath this perfect image, a brewing turmoil was about to spiral into a dark abyss from which there was no return. In November 1971, the unimaginable happened. The entire List family was brutally murdered, and the perpetrator vanished into thin air, leaving behind a mystery that would baffle authorities for nearly 2 decades. What was the real motive behind this horrifying act? And how did an ordinary man mastermind one of the most infamous disappearances in American history? To understand the tragedy of Breeze Knoll, we must journey back to the origins of its central figure, John List. Born in 1925 in Bay City, Michigan, to German-American parents, John's upbringing was steeped in a strict Lutheran faith, a doctrine that would dictate much of his life's path. John grew in the shadow of a domineering father and the weight of religious expectation. His home life was devoid of warmth and affection, replaced instead with rigid discipline and the demand for perfection. Seeking escape and perhaps a sense of purpose, List served as a laboratory technician in the Army during World War II. In 1944, his father died. After List was discharged in 1946, his return to civilian life saw him armed with a degree in accounting, a profession that prized the order and control he had long been conditioned to uphold. In 1950, he re-enlisted to fight in the Korean War. At Fort Eustis in Virginia, he met 24-year-old Helen Morris Taylor, a widow with a daughter, Brenda. Her husband was killed in action in Korea. Helen became the first woman of 26-year-old List. In 1951, John married her. The union, blessed under the eyes of God, was expected to be the foundation of John's ideal family. But beneath the surface, cracks began to form, revealing the dark side of the American dream. Helen's battle with alcoholism and a diagnosis of tertiary syphilis, a secret she kept from John until after their marriage, planted seeds of betrayal and resentment. This disease made her nearly blind. Helen's disability prevented her from walking, and she mostly stayed in bed. The couple had 3 children together, Patricia, John Jr., and Frederick. In 1960, List's stepdaughter Brenda got married and left their house. John was vice president and controller in a bank, and also Sunday school teacher at the local church. The family never missed a service. To the outside world, they were a picture-perfect family. Yet, John's inability to reconcile the imperfections of his family life with the unattainable standards set by his faith and upbringing foreshadowed a silent storm brewing on the horizon. 1965 marked a turning point for the Lists as they moved into Breeze Knoll, a 19-room Victorian mansion with marble fireplaces and a Tiffany skylight in Westfield, New Jersey. It was a grand statement, but its upkeep put a strain on John's finances, further exacerbating the pressure he felt to provide and maintain the facade of success. It was the most expensive house in Westfield at the time, and the family could not fully furnish it. List's neighbors said he was cold and reserved. Sometimes they saw John mowing his lawn in a full suit and tie. His marriage was probably unhappy. The family's Lutheran pastor overheard Helen saying to John, "If you were half the man my first husband was, we wouldn't be having the troubles we're having." John's professional life was marked by frequent changes and failures, a stark contrast to the image of stability he desperately sought to project. In 1971, at the age of 46, John List lost his position at the bank. The job loss was a personal humiliation, a failure not only as a provider but as a man worthy of respect and admiration. His efforts to find another employment were unsuccessful. The thought of informing his family about the loss of income seemed unbearable. He dressed for work every morning and spent his days at the train station reading newspapers and covertly withdrew funds from his mother's bank accounts to cover the mortgage. List declined to seek welfare assistance, fearing the humiliating shame it would bring upon him in the community and contravening the values of self-reliance instilled in him by his father. The psychological portrait of John List that emerges is one of a man at war with himself, torn between the dogmatic beliefs of his upbringing and the realities of his faltering life. John was walking a tightrope of his own making. The chasm between the ideal and the real was widening, pushing him to the brink. As winter's chill enveloped the town of Westfield, a shroud of mystery began to unfurl around the stately List mansion. What lay within its walls was a secret so dark it would chill the bones of a community. Days turned to weeks since anyone had seen John List or his family. Neighbors grew concerned, lights in the mansion burned day and night, yet its inhabitants seemed to have vanished into thin air. The once meticulous lawn now lay unkempt, a silent testament to the abnormality of the situation. Finally, light bulbs started burning out one by one. December 7, 1971, marked the day the silence was broken. Police, responding to concerned calls, entered Breeze Knoll. Nothing could have prepared them for the scene that awaited. Organ church music was playing in the cold house as the heating had been turned off. In the mansion's ballroom, the lifeless bodies of the List family were found, each meticulously laid out. John's wife, Helen, their 3 children, Patricia, John Jr., Frederick, and his mother, Alma, had all been shot. It was a methodical execution, a chillingly orchestrated end to a family. On November 9, 1971, List dropped the children off at school. He returned home around 9 a.m. and got 2 old handguns from his garage. While his children were at school, he entered the kitchen where his 47-year-old wife, Helen, was having toast and sipping her morning coffee. He shot her in the back of her head. Then he went upstairs to his 84-year-old mother's room on the 3rd floor. She was making toast. Greeting him with a kiss, she asked him about the loud noise. List said he didn't know and shot her in the face. "Like Judas, I gave her a kiss," he remarked later. Then he dragged his wife's body to the ballroom, mopped the floor in the kitchen, and ate a sandwich waiting for his children. In his memoir, List wrote that he had to mop the floor 3 or 4 times, and because they had no mop wringer, he had to wring it by hand. He confessed that he experienced no qualms or feelings of remorse. His 16-year-old daughter, Patricia, and 13-year-old son, Frederick, arrived home from school. List shot each of them in the back of the head. "I approached all of them from behind so they wouldn't realize at the last moment what I was going to do to them," he said later. "After it was all over, I said some prayers for them all. From the hymn book, that was the least that I could do." He said he had to kill his mother because the other deaths would have been a tremendous shock to her. After that, List had lunch and drove to the post office, and then to his bank to close both his and his mother's bank accounts. Later, he drove to Westfield High School to watch his 15-year-old son, John, play in a soccer game. He drove him home where he shot him 10 times. Evidence of a misfire indicated that his son tried to defend himself. He also didn't die at once, hence List shot multiple times. "I didn't want him to suffer," he said later. He sent notes to the children's schools and part-time jobs saying that the children would be visiting their ill grandmother in North Carolina for a few weeks. Milk, mail, and newspaper deliveries were stopped by him. List arranged the bodies of his wife and children on sleeping bags in the mansion's ballroom. Their faces were covered with rags. His mother's body was left in her converted apartment in the attic. List slept in the house where his family lay dead, then left the next morning. Before leaving, he tuned a radio to a religious station, leaving religious hymns playing in the empty rooms of the house. He explained that the music over the intercom was supposed to deter burglars. When the police discovered the bodies, John List was nowhere to be found. The man who sought control above all had orchestrated his family's demise before vanishing, leaving behind only a haunting letter that attempted to justify the unjustifiable. It was a 5-page letter to his pastor. List's letter speaks volumes. It reveals a man who saw himself as a failure, unable to fulfill the roles society and his faith demanded of him. In his mind, murdering his family was a twisted salvation from financial ruin and the moral decay he perceived. In his letter, he said, "As I was doing it, I knew it was wrong. But as he was broke, he didn't want to subject his children to poverty and the shame of losing their mansion. He also said he saw too much evil in the world, and he had killed his family to save their souls. He was afraid that his family, confronted with a world full of evil and poverty, would turn from God. To his mind, this was the only way to ensure their safe arrival in heaven. He said, "I've finally decided that the only way to save them from that was to kill them." He wrote that his family was turning away from God and would ultimately spend eternity in hell for their sins because his wife Helen had stopped going to church. Moreover, his teenage daughter Patty desired to become an actress. I'm sure many will say, "How can anyone do such a horrible thing?" My only answer is it isn't easy and was only done after much thought. At the end of the letter, he wrote, "Mother is in the hallway in the attic, 3rd floor. She was too heavy to move." List's letter offered a window into a fractured mind. His actions suggested a delusional belief system. His need for control and perfection, coupled with deep religious convictions, warped into a justification for his unfathomable choice. The discovery of the List murders sent shockwaves through Westfield. One of the first officers who saw the bodies, Robert Kenny, said, "After 28 years as a police officer and 14 as an investigator, you see everything. But this was unique. The mystery of John List's disappearance would confound authorities for nearly 2 decades. But as the manhunt stretched on, the legend of John List grew, a ghostly figure who had slipped through the cracks of a society he could no longer face. With the grim discovery inside Breeze Knoll, the quiet town of Westfield found itself at the epicenter of a horrifying mystery. The investigation into the List family murders unfolded like a puzzle missing crucial pieces. Each room of the mansion told a part of the story, but the narrator of this tragic tale was conspicuously absent. As the manhunt for John List began, investigators faced the daunting task of tracking a man who seemed to have evaporated. Meanwhile, the public grappled with the duality of a devout churchgoer and a cold-blooded killer. List had planned his escape meticulously, cleaning the crime scenes, cutting himself out of every family photo with scissors, severing ties, and leaving no trace. He burned the photos along with his passport in his Weber grill. In an era before digital footprints, List vanished into the ether. The FBI found his car parked at Kennedy International Airport in New York, but there was no trace of him. The police investigated hundreds of leads without success. In August 1972, 9 months after the murder, Breeze Knoll stood empty until it was mysteriously destroyed by fire. There were rumors that the house was cursed. Despite being officially deemed arson, no suspects have been identified. The fire also consumed the mansion's ballroom-stained glass skylight, believed to be a signed Tiffany original and valued at around $100,000 at that time, which would be approximately $700,000 today. Selling the ceiling would have allowed List to pay off his debts. By 1974, a new house had been constructed on the property. The absence of technology in 1970s was a cloak of invisibility for List. His identity was erased. For List, it was a desperate bid for survival, a twisted form of self-preservation that made him abandon his name, his history, and his crimes. Assuming the name Robert Peter Clark, List started anew in Denver, Colorado. Here, he melded into the fabric of society, unnoticed. For List, integrating into a new life was simpler in a city like Denver, which during the 1970s saw a significant number of people relocating from the East Coast. He grew a mustache, swapped his suits for casual clothes, and took to wearing a cap, yet made no significant effort to alter his appearance further. He first worked as a chef at a Holiday Inn, and between 1979 and 1986, he worked as the controller for a paper box manufacturing company located just outside Denver. Adopting a new identity allowed List to compartmentalize his guilt and live outwardly as a regular citizen. Yet, beneath the surface, the burden of his past life lingered, a specter only he could see. List's new life was a mirror of the old, minus the family he had destroyed. He worked in accounting, remarried, and maintained a facade of devout faith. He became a member of a Lutheran church and organized a carpool for congregants without transport. At a church event, he encountered 35-year-old divorcee Dolores Miller, an Army PX clerk, and they married in 1985. He told her his first wife had died of cancer and moved into her apartment in Aurora, Colorado, situated 10 miles east of Denver. In February 1988, the couple moved to a house in the Brander Mill neighborhood of Midlothian, Virginia. There, List continued his career in accounting at a small firm. For nearly 2 decades, John List, now Bob Clark, believed he had outsmarted the world and committed the perfect crime. He let his guard down, losing his mustache. But as the 18th anniversary of the murders approached, a television show was about to shatter his illusion of freedom. On May 21, 1989, a pivotal episode of America's Most Wanted aired, turning the tide in one of the most baffling manhunts in American history. The decision to feature List on the show was a gamble. With few leads and fading memories, the case had grown cold. But America's Most Wanted had a secret weapon, an age-progressed clay sculpture of List, crafted by forensic artist Frank Bender. Psychologists speculated that List might wear spectacles similar to those he wore in his youth, as a reminder of more successful days. Bender's creation was eerily prescient. He envisioned List with glasses and a receding hairline, a testament to the power of forensic artistry. An audience of 22 million saw the sculpture. When the episode aired, the phone lines lit up. On that evening, a man known as Robert Clark was present at a church event in Midlothian, Virginia. Meanwhile, several of his acquaintances were at their homes, contacting the hotline established by America's Most Wanted. They identified their reserved friend and neighbor as the individual who had horrifically murdered his family years earlier. At the same time, people from Golden, Colorado, were reaching out to the same hotline, asserting that John List and Robert Clark, the local French fry cook who had recently moved to Virginia, were indeed the same person. An old friend of Dolores recognized the man on TV and also made a call. One tip came from List's next-door neighbor. According to her, the resemblance was striking. She said her neighbor was also an accountant and attended church. The viewer's tips led authorities to Virginia. The confrontation was the culmination of years of evasion, a moment when List's meticulously constructed world came crashing down. FBI agents knocked on the door of the shared home of Dolores and Robert Clark. Dolores answered, but her husband was at work. She showed them two photos, one from their wedding day, which were the spitting image of the bust. One officer stayed with her while the other rushed to List's accounting firm where he was apprehended. The arrest of List, who had been a pillar of respectability to the outside world, was a shock. FBI agent Kevin August said, "He was a strange man, I would say. He was not very animated. That's the best way to put it. He seemed to me as a vessel with no soul in there." When driving List to the police station, August asked, "What kind of man are you, that you killed your mother, your wife, and your children, and then assumed another identity and married another woman who has no idea who you are?" List said nothing, but a single tear rolled down his eye. List maintained his assumed identity for months after being extradited back to Union County, New Jersey, in 1989. However, on February 16, 1990, when confronted with undeniable proof, including fingerprints matching those in his military records and crime scene evidence, he admitted to his real identity. In custody, List confessed to the murders, citing financial ruin and a twisted belief that killing his family was a merciful act, sparing them the shame of poverty. But there were deeper issues at play. List's need for control, his rigid moralism, and his inability to face failure. His actions, though unfathomable, were a twisted solution to an unsolvable problem in his mind. Expert psychologists also believed that List was going through a midlife crisis. The prosecution pointed out that was no excuse for killing 5 innocent people. A court-appointed psychiatrist determined that List suffered from obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, believing his only options were either to accept welfare, which he deemed unacceptable due to the potential for public ridicule, and the contradiction of his father's principles regarding the care and protection of family members, or to kill his family, ensuring their ascent to heaven. Alan Goldstein, who examined List for the defense, said, "It wasn't as if he didn't have a conscience. If anything, his conscience was too bright. He felt responsible for saving souls." His wife couldn't believe that List was a mass murderer. She said, "I love my husband very deeply. I cannot believe this is the same man." Later, List confessed to his wife, sobbing and saying to her, "I was always such a kind, gentle man, except for that one act." John List's capture closed a long-standing chapter of mystery and horror, but it also opened a window into the mind of a killer, revealing the dark corners where rationality warps into madness. The trial of John List unfolded in a Union County courthouse. Defense lawyers depicted List as someone deeply affected by a religious upbringing enforced by his parents, which, they argued, drove him to madness. However, the jury was unconvinced. Throughout the trial, the emotionless tone of List's letters, his clearly planned escape strategies, and his lack of remorse, maintaining he acted as the savior rather than the murderer of his family, resulted in his conviction. During his trial, List testified that his financial difficulties reached crisis level in 1971, following his job loss due to the shutdown of the Jersey City Bank. To hide this embarrassing fact from his family, he maintained his usual routines. Over time, the family's financial situation became worse, leading List to encourage his children to find part-time work under the guise of teaching them responsibility, though it was actually a strategy to aid the family's finances. Furthermore, he struggled with his wife Helen's alcohol dependency and her undisclosed tertiary syphilis, which she had hidden for 18 years after contracting it from her first husband. Helen had manipulated List into marrying her by falsely claiming pregnancy, then insisted on a Maryland wedding to avoid states that required syphilis testing before marriage. At the time, a premarital syphilis test was mandated in most other states. Her condition deteriorated over the years. She didn't say anything about that to List, but a thorough examination revealed the condition in 1969. Eventually, her disease, together with her excessive drinking, transformed her into an unkempt and paranoid recluse who would often humiliate List in public, comparing him unfavorably to her first husband in bed. John List's actions were a cataclysmic culmination of years of internal and external pressures. Financial despair, a crumbling facade of familial perfection, and a rigid, punitive religious upbringing coalesced into a devastating breakdown of his moral and psychological boundaries. Witness after witness painted a portrait of a man at odds with reality. Yet, it was List's own letters and the chilling confession tape played for the jury that offered the most haunting insights into his psyche. In his confession, List spoke with a chilling calmness, claiming financial ruin and a misguided attempt to save his family's souls as his motives. But beneath this veneer of rationalization lurked deeper, darker struggles. When the verdict came, it was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. On April 12, 1990, List was found guilty on 5 counts of first-degree murder. During his sentencing hearing, he refused to fully accept blame, stating, "I feel that because of my mental state at the time, I was unaccountable for what happened. I ask all affected by this for their forgiveness, understanding, and prayer." However, the judge firmly disagreed, declaring, "John List is without remorse and without honor," he said. After 18 years, 5 months, and 22 days, it is now time for the voices of Helen, Alma, Patricia, Frederick, and John List to rise from the grave. List received the maximum sentence allowed then, 5 consecutive life terms. List appealed his conviction, citing post-traumatic stress disorder from his military experience as impairing his judgment and claiming the letter found at the crime scene, which was essentially a confession, should be considered a confidential message to his pastor and not admissible in court. These appeals were dismissed by a federal appeals court. Years later, List admitted some regret for his actions in a 2002 interview with Connie Chung, saying, "I wish I had never done what I did. I've regretted my action and prayed for forgiveness ever since." Regarding why he didn't take his own life, he believed it would have prevented him from going to heaven, where he hoped to be reunited with his family. "So eventually I got to the point where I felt that I could kill them. Hopefully, they would go to heaven, and then maybe I would have a chance to later confess my sins to God and get forgiveness." He also said, "When we get to heaven, they'll either have forgiven me or won't realize what had happened. I'm sure that if we recognize each other, we'll like each other's company just like we did here when times were better." List passed away at the age of 82 from pneumonia complications on March 21, 2008, in prison at St. Francis Medical Center in Trenton, New Jersey. John List's case became a cornerstone in the study of family annihilators, offering insights into the mind of a killer who operates under the guise of protector, driven by twisted logic and profound psychological distress.